Hello, hello. You're listening to Northern Fútbol, episode number 203, our post-game edition as Canada have emerged victorious, 1-0 beating Suriname on the road in their Concacaf Nations League quarterfinal first leg. Doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you get the wins. My name is Brendan Dunlop, alongside Alexandre Gonge-Ruzik. What's up, my man?
I'm doing great. I was about to say something about, man, I love these late night records. It gives me Copa America vibes. And then I checked the clock. It's 6:10 here. So shout out to the sun going down so early, and shout out to this game being so early.
Yeah, I always take like a month to adjust to what time it actually is, because it just feels so much later, and it's too late to go to Shoppers to do this errand. Oh no, it's 6:17 right now. You've just finished dinner. You can totally do it. So I'm glad that for you, the time difference allows us to do a Friday night record. So you're listening to this on Saturday. You're getting our fresh takes. And Ben Steiner's going to join us a little bit. He's working the press conference. So he'll have some more takes after Jesse Marsh and company speak. But after a 1-0 victory, courtesy of a Junior Hoylett late goal, Alex, what was your take on the first leg?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's you take the result. I know, there was a lot of, I guess, in this sense, you can never be too mad at, because it's a sign of how much the CanMNT has grown as a team. But I felt like the reaction to this was quite negative, and I'm like, I guess fair, because watching the game, look, it's not the prettiest game. I suppose if you came aboard during the Copa America and you're used to, even Copa America, I know is we've said it, it's sometimes a tough tournament to watch, but a game like this takes it to a whole new level. Yeah, it was frustrating. The pitch wasn't great. The ball wasn't sticking. There was a million fouls. It was hot. It was sluggish. But that's CONCACAF. That's away days. You saw the U.S. deal with it yesterday in Jamaica. You see that across the region. Ultimately, away leg game like this, you judge it on getting the job done, and they did 1-0. And I think ultimately that's what matters. So I think I was most satisfied with that. And overall, I think you look at the game plan too. They had three of the best chances of the game. They hit the post on one. Ali Ahmed got robbed on the other, and they score. Yes, they conceded that crossbar off the set piece, but other than that, Suriname had 0 shots on target. They had 2 shot attempts. I think overall you can be pretty pleased with that, no?
Yeah, I agree. I think that Canadians are spoiled, as we've realized over the last year. Take that back to Qatar, because I think the expectation from a lot of people who are casual fans or had come onto it late or cheered for other countries and finally were excited to cheer for Canada were quite upset to see Canada go 0-3 in Qatar, and felt as though maybe their energy and their investment in this national squad was wasted. But as we saw at Copa America, this team continues to get better and better, and they are a must-watch team. The reality is, in CONCACAF, not every game is must-watch. And for the people that did watch that game, if they went out of their way to find it and watch Canada beat Suriname 1-0 very late, then they might be pretty frustrated with that. However, let's remind all of these people, including a lot of the diehards that you may have seen complaining on Twitter or on Blue Sky, about how unenjoyable that game was. There's 100 teams in between these two in the FIFA World Rankings. 100. When was the last time that Canada's been in that situation?
Yeah, I guess. Well, also, that's one of those things though where Suriname's such an outlier, because I mean, I don't personally, they're not 130th ranked team. We know that they're far better than their ranking suggests. But this Suriname team's good. Becker was he was fun to watch. He was causing all sorts of problems for that Canada right side there.
Yeah, they look like a team that, in the old format of the Hex, or the old the format that Canada qualified in the Oct, they look like a team that would be challenging for an 8th spot. They certainly don't look 136 in the world. They're investing a lot. They're getting new players.
For a playoff, I'd even add that 5th, 6th playoff in the Hex, right, or the Octo, I guess it is.
Yeah, they're a team that you may continually see in the quarterfinals of the Nations League now. They're not going to be a power, but that gap in the world rankings will close considerably. And I think that's kind of what you saw on the pitch tonight. And also, you have to take into account, people forget this all the time, that's an 8-hour flight from Toronto for anyone who would come from the Toronto camp. Yes, they went to Fort Lauderdale first, but part of that is to shorten the flight load on them ahead of match day. And then most of these players, or half of the team, have another flight back to Europe that'll be another 6 or 7 hours from Toronto in addition. So there's a lot of mileage on the body. I know that's not an excuse or anything, but when you are up against a team that you are expected to beat, it's hard to sometimes get up and play to your level for 90 minutes completely. What always shines through, or what is beginning to shine through for Canada consistently now, is the quality that they have. And Jonathan David, I wrote this on Canadian Soccer Daily, is not only a goal-scoring machine, he's also a goal-creating machine. And when they needed it, he found Junior Hoylett, the ageless wonder, 34 in the box, and that's why we're talking about Canada's 1-0 edge coming home to Toronto for Tuesday.
Yeah, well, I just would want to add, too, I think this was a test Canada needs to pass, and they're going to need to keep passing, because we kind of mentioned, I want to say, maybe during the October window or the September window, Canada's kind of like, Jesse Marsch isn't new, so to speak, right? Like, there isn't this surprise of, whoa, Canada's playing this way under a new coach. There's sample size of 10, 12, 15 games now, or not quite, but, they're starting to get some sample size. I think teams are realizing, all right, these are their strengths. Let's try to limit them. One of the things we've seen a lot recently, fouls. Today was another one, like chop Canada down, make the game choppy, take away their rhythm. Another one, which I thought was fascinating, actually Jimmy Brennan was doing a good job of pointing it out on the broadcast, was, Suriname, they're a possession team. I was doing the research, and there's 7 games under their new manager. They've won the possession battle, 5 of them. They average 55% of possession. They did not want the ball whatsoever. They had 70% pass completion. They kept 35% of the ball. They did not want to play into Canada's press. They're just all right, we're just going to go direct and have a better chance at second balls. That's an adjustment where Canada's press was rendered ineffective, not because the opponents were so good in possession, but because their opponents refused to try to build out of the back and to play into those traps. When that happens, Canada has to be ready to adjust. Where's the goals going to come from if it's not those same pressing moments? Can we break down a low block? And, to their credit, they found an answer when they needed to get the win.
Mm-hmm. Were you surprised by the changes that Jesse Marsch made, partnering Moise Bombito with Joel Waterman, as I think we predicted on Tuesday, or I said on Tuesday that I expected Waterman to step in cleanly?
Yeah, that was a good call. I think I was happy to see it and deserved. And I think after this game, it must be said, Waterman had some hairy moments. There was that one, 2 minutes in, where he got turnstiled a bit, and you're like, oh, this could be a long night. But he recovered very nicely, had some big headers at the end. Very good, deserved call. I think you can probably say he's the number 3 now, right? If it wasn't clear between him and Kamal Miller, he's really staked his claim in Jesse Marsch's eyes. I thought that was great. Richie Larea continues to be Mr. Dependable. I know it would have been nice to see Sam Medecoog. Be a bit disappointing not to see him at all, given his form, but Larea continues to be super dependable. And then there's Tani Oluwase, right? That one was, of course, we found out it was injury related, that Kyle Aaron had come off a bit of a knock and, hadn't fully trained all week. So he was 30-minute fit and got the 30 minutes there. But it was cool to see, Tani get his Tani time. Unfortunately, it wasn't meant to be with the goal, but that's one of those where we continue to say it. It feels like for him, he just needs that one chance for his confidence to blow, because he continues to get in good areas. And I know there'll be people saying he's got to put one away eventually. I agree with you. It's one of those where you'd like to put this away because Canada wins this game more comfortably. But, for a depth striker, it feels like with him, you're more encouraged about the positions he's getting into.
It's hard to get excited by how well he scores goals for Minnesota United, because it doesn't translate to Canada, obviously, right? So
Sorry, Ben.
Yeah, that was a Ben shout for you NFP listeners wondering why I'm piling on Tani Oluwase. But it does feel like he's snake bitten though. Like when it went off both posts, like I did feel for the guy, and I think it's very easy, as a play-by-play commentator to react like, oh my goodness, like how did that not go in? But Gareth Wheeler was absolutely justified in that situation, because the first after you process the ball not crossing the line, the first thing you clock is, oh, it was Tani. Oh yeah, of course that happened, and not one post but two. It just feels like that's his luck in a Canada shirt.
Well, it's funny because you look at the two post hits, and what I mean by the two is the Hoylett, like a Tani Oluwase, still looking for his moment, still unproven for Canada. Just as luck, it hits both posts, and then a Junior Hoylett, the poise, the veteran experience. He's been there, done that, crossbarred in, right? That's sometimes the margins where it's almost like it comes with experience, it comes with time, and that's almost why you're encouraging, or at least why I'm encouraged with Oluwase, because I'm always team, like, I'd rather have a striker that gets those chances than one that doesn't get them at all. But also then it shows where a poise of a Hoylett, where maybe down the road it'll be common sign for Oluwase to be hitting them, posting in like Hoylett did on a goal, not that goal. Like what a finish that was.
You're talking about what service too, though, right? We've
David.
spoken a lot about what it's like for Jonathan David playing with Kyle Larin. We haven't had enough of a sample size of seeing them not play together and how Jonathan David plays. So, what did your analytical eye see from Suriname?
Yeah, this was another really good game for Jonathan David. Not what we're used to seeing, but he was creative. He was everywhere. Just so good at just getting on the ball, calming the game down. He plays like a midfielder. You almost have to remember, like, this is a striker. And the stats speak for itself. He got an assist. He had 4 chances created. That's never a bad day at all for a player of his caliber. But no, overall, I think by the eye test, you could just see he was really controlling the game. And for Canada, if anything, they just need to get him the ball more, because it felt like he was the one player that was kind of unlocking that defense, where some of the other guys, especially Schaffelberg and Ahmed, it was a bit touch and go in terms of being able to impact the game. But David just seemed to bring everyone around him together, as he did on the goal. Yeah,
it was interesting to see how he adjusted to having more space and took advantage of it. I think for Lille sometimes, in the absence of when Timothy Weah left, it seemed as though it took him a while to kind of adjust at club level too to what space to occupy. I think for Canada, having not had the opportunity to play without Larin before, doing that on the road in a match where you're heavily favored and they got the win in the end, I think that was a pretty good experience for him. To your point about having to adapt to your game when the way you had been playing hadn't been as effective with the press and that, I think it was that's a really good test for him to have, and to come back to Toronto. He'll probably play 60, 70 minutes again, but maybe he doesn't have to play 90. Maybe Tony doesn't have to start. Maybe we're looking at a first half for Kyle Larin. It's nice that he's got some options. Jesse Marsh has some options. Seeing Moise Bombito and Richie Larea both hit the dirt there in the final few minutes just seemed like fatigue. Hopefully nothing too serious. I think you're going to see more lineup changes on Tuesday when they return home for the second leg.
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough game, tough 90, tough light, short turnaround, right? It's only Saturday, Sunday, Monday rest, and one of those is a travel day. So I expect rotation. That's perhaps why some guys got longer runs than I expected, right? Like, I was a bit surprised to see Ahmed and Schaffelberg go, it was like 75. I thought maybe they'd be candidates to come in around 60, but I think that indicates that maybe we'll see some of these guys. Like, it feels like an Adekugbe start might be me loading with some of the minutes that the guys at the back had to eat up there, and I'm sure there's some others as well, like Schwanier coming in late in the game. Feels like we'll see him potentially even start next game. Osorio, maybe with how well he played. Like, there'll be some options to come in.
Were you surprised that Ahmed and Schaffelberg weren't as impactful? Because both those guys are, they're a couple weeks out. Schaffelberg's probably maybe 3.5 weeks out since his last competitive game now. But I think these MLS guys, the expectation is these guys are still very much in season top form, and they didn't hit their level in Suriname on Friday.
Yeah, they just seemed off. They did some good things. What I will say is just having their presence stretch the field, right? It felt like in the first half they were doing a good job of at least just going and doing things, but it's one of those where those things weren't always coming off, and that can be a bit frustrating sometimes. And in terms of just, you want your wide players to constantly be offering that final product, but it's I guess a bit of a give and take in terms of that regard of what you got from them, and they kept the fullbacks occupied. So I guess you can't be too mad at that. One thing I will say for an Ahmed, I think it would have helped him to have Johnston play a bit more forward. I understand they want to kind of keep the fullbacks a bit more conservative. I was surprised, because Johnston didn't get forward as much. Even Larea, right? They weren't getting forward too much. I think that could have helped massively. And it was interesting. I noticed when the first change came around 60, for about those 10-15 minutes, Ahmed started to tuck in more, and he seemed to come alive for a bit. And I think maybe that's what he lost a bit in this game, where he was asked to stretch the field too much. And as we see for the Whitecaps, he's at his best when you're getting him combining in those half spaces in central areas. And then for Schaffelberg, I think it was just something where, for his, of a weird game as it was, he still had some great deliveries. He was the one who set up Ahmed for that golden chance. So he did have some good moments. It just felt like the ball, when he wasn't making the head down Schaffelberg runs, that's where maybe he struggled, when the ball was sticking to him a bit too long.
Let's get to your questions. I will do the Twitter ones here, and then when Ben comes on, you guys can hit the Blue Sky one, since Blue Sky is the new gen. You guys are the young ones. I might as well go the old bird, the old Tweety Bird site. I still call it Twitter. You guys always call it X. Johnny on the spot 12. He had a question about Waterman and Kamal, which we kind of got into there, about Waterman being the guy that's kind of pipped Kamal for the number 3 spot, which I agree with you, and I think it's justified. And I think that Waterman's game is still on the up and developing, and I think that Kamal Miller may have peaked. Still can be serviceable for country and still valuable for club, but I think that he may have peaked. So he'll be sharing some time now that he's fallen down the pecking order for Jesse Marsh. But Johnny the Spot 12 asking, what do you think of the set pieces? Even though we haven't scored from them yet, Canada hasn't scored, I feel Chouinier's deliveries have been consistently the most dangerous. Big question is, how do you fit him in? It does seem like that's the one kind of outlying question where we don't have a real answer. Is like, who's the set piece taker? They haven't found that, and I don't know if there is a glaring one, an outstanding one.
Yeah, I mean, it's a favorite topic on here, but I mean, after a game like today, it's a huge storyline because, I mean, Brendan, let's be honest, they were awful, terrible, horrific. Pick your adjective. It felt like nothing cleared the first man, and then when it did, it went sailing across for like a corner the other way. Like, it's just not good enough. I think in a game like this where it was so choppy, so chippy, like, you just didn't make Suriname feel like fouling you was a deterrent, right? Because, like, maybe if you're scoring set pieces, scoring corners, there might be a bit of a hesitation to dive in on or not dive in on a Schaffelberg or a Larea or an Ahmed or a David. And it felt like today was just like open season, and why not? Because Canada wasn't going to punish you. And yeah, it really feels like it comes down to delivery. And we've wondered a lot if Eustachio could be the guy on it today. Like today, it wasn't it for him. He was struggling in particular really badly with the set pieces. Chouinier did come in late, and Canada, some of their best looks came with him on the field, so it is a bit of something to watch. I do wonder if maybe it'll genuinely come down to a philosophical approach. Like, I'm gonna, let's shout them out, like, because we see it a lot. CPL, Tommy Wilden Jr. and Calvary, they've got some incredible set pieces where it's not always a guy just whipping in the box. It's short corners, guys running, stuff off the ball. For Canada, maybe that's just the way to go, where you're almost better off like mimicking a game situation on a wide free kick and turning it into a cross, and then on a corner trying something, because it just felt like a waste. Because it's not like they don't have targets. Like, it feels like Bombito could be very useful in that regard. We've seen Waterman score some headers when Laren's on the pitch. He's always a threat, and they're just not even getting the ball close to any of those guys. And I think, in terms of delivery guys, in terms of the starters, I think they've kind of run out of guys to try. There's one guy left that maybe I'd like to see tried after his last few games. It's Jonathan David, but even then, it's kind of like, I'd almost be in favor of trying the new setup versus giving David a look, although you could give him a few free kicks and set pieces and see if he can provide something.
Based off of how set pieces were a disaster on Friday, I think it would be smart to either make David or Eustachio the guy to at least start all the set pieces in the first half in Toronto, and I think you'll get a better result regardless of who it is. I think they'll look totally different. That match will look nothing like Friday night. It should be a heavy scoreline in favor of Canada. Of course, that's not always the case. We thought that was going to be the case at this same level last November against Jamaica, and don't need to revisit how that went. But I think that'd be a good way to start. And I do kind of, you look at in the absence of Davies on the pitch, and the absence of Laren not being there as another top end guy. Yeah, David seems to be the guy. If it wasn't working by committee and you're not going to have Chouinier in there from the start, then go with David, and then you can adjust from there. So there'll be a few adjustments, I think, Jesse Marsh makes, so it'll be interesting and exciting to watch on Tuesday.
Of course, that's it, right? It's all about the adjustments and set pieces. I mean, I'll continue to hammer on. It feels like, especially in a World Cup and in the bigger games, it feels like it could be a differential that Canada could really use to their advantage.
Yeah, totally. I'll do one more here. _Burke_footy. Jonathan Osorio came on, really steadied the ship in midfield in the second half. He's really adept at unlocking a low block, passing through the lines. Do you think that he gets a look at the start on Tuesday night? Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Based on the rotation and the fact that maybe you can split him, you can save Eustachio, you can save Kone. I don't think either of those guys, I don't think it's smart to run either of those guys for 180 minutes. I don't think Jesse Marsch thought that coming into this window, but that is definitely his strongest midfield. That's the pivot that you want to see. I just don't think you need to see those two for the entire night. And Jonathan Osorio always seems up for it when he plays at BMO Field for his country, so that's someone you want to ride. And I think riding it from the beginning is not a bad situation for Canada, or not a bad idea, given the fact that they've got the 1-0 edge going into a game that they're expected to win.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think Osorio could be very valuable. I am curious to see how they approach it, though, because I smell Kone was pretty good in that first half. For me, he was probably one of Canada's better players. You could see what he brings immediately in terms of just a guy that brings tempo and, gets on the ball. But he's not, I guess not fully fixed. We only saw him go 60, which I guess good on Marsch to manage those minutes. What I'm curious is, is that because he only went 60, do we see him again on Tuesday? Perhaps. One thing I do wonder, I've been talking a lot about, is how Kone's absence during the last few windows maybe denied Marsch of a chance to really try the 4-2-3-1. But we did see during the Copa America Uruguay game where it was Choinière, Kone, and Osorio as a 3. I do wonder if he tries to replicate that with the new Stacchio, Kone, Osorio. Maybe you try him as a 10. I just say that because if Suriname's going to push more, they need to push, they need a goal. Maybe you try throwing that third body in the midfield. You let David stretch the line up front. You put some pace on the wings, and really try to hit them in transition. It could make sense to have that three in midfield to combat the fact that Suriname might be throwing more numbers forward.
Some of the freedom that you saw from Jonathan David on Friday night, do you sacrifice that by going with Jonathan Osorio as a number 10? Because I wonder if that's what Marsch will be debating ahead of Tuesday.
I guess that's the battle, the trade-off, right, is what you get from David as a 10. Because I think what the thing is that's tough with David is because he's so good at the 10, right? Nice. You almost forget how good he's at striker, right? It's almost like he leads the line for Lille. He does that already. It's for Canada.
And if Laren's not there, you want to see that again. That is his strongest position and where you think you can get the most impact out of him.
Yeah, and like if Laren's not fully fit, you gave Oluwase his cameo. It's one of those where ultimately you maybe give him you push him back to the bench after this game. I'd love to see a Theo Bair start, but I don't think that's going to happen because it's something we're going to have to see him get more minutes off the bench first. I do wonder if there's a scenario where David leading the line is a likely outcome on Tuesday, and I think that could be a nice wrinkle too, right? Because David leading the line gives you a bit of something different, to deal with, and then that brings in Osorio, maybe get a little more control in a leg 2 where, yes, 1-0, you're not comfortable yet. Like, you're going to need the first goal to really get comfortable, and even then you might need a second on top of that. But I think having that extra control can make a big difference, because I feel like we're going to see some adjustments from Suriname. This felt like for all the talk of Canada maybe not playing their best game, I felt like for Suriname this was far from their best game, and no shots on target at home, like I mentioned, low possession, low passing. That's not their style of play at all. And they might almost be happier to go to the pitch at BMO. I know it's not great either, but usually the ball flows a little better than it was today in Suriname. That you feel like you have to be prepared for some Suriname adjustments.
I didn't make notes on Suriname's fixture list coming in, but Canada's the toughest opponent they've faced in a long time. Maybe even the toughest opponent, if I'm not mistaken, that they've faced since they had Mexico. Did they have Mexico?
They had Mexico in Nations League.
Okay.
They had Costa Rica this year in Nations League, which
they did. Okay.
Some decently tough teams.
I knew there was another one. Well, Mexico, I would say for sure. I knew there was another one. I thought it was Honduras or it was a Panama or something, but. Their program has taken a considerable step since we were all afraid of Suriname in 2021. And as I say, I think there'll be a team that you're expecting, like Trinidad and Tobago were, Jamaica have been in the past, Costa Rica had been in the past before kind of cementing themselves as a top 6 CONCACAF regular. Panama, we're talking about top 8, top 10 in CONCACAF now. Those bottom 3 spots will rotate, and Suriname are becoming a team that I think will regularly be in kind of that bottom 3, bottom 4 in a top 12 in the region. So that's exciting to see. And as much as we like to rip and criticize FIFA, that's exactly what Nations League was created for, right? And I think that this is a really good tangible proof that it's working. Maybe it's not always convenient. Maybe it's come with some cons as well. Change usually does. But from a competitive perspective, it has made the region more exciting. And I think it has Canadians and a lot of other fan bases a little more geared up for these international windows, when for a long time there wasn't. And there was a comment in the broadcast, I think Wheeler had made it, about Osorio's appearance, because he's now become the fourth most capped Canadian international, behind Tiba Hutchison, Julian de Guzman, and Paul Stalteri. There's not, it used to feel like there was a big gap between those guys who had hit 80s or 70 plus, and then Jimmy Brennan or D-Row, who didn't quite get as high. D-Row was close, but some of those names that you expected, these guys play way more games now. And for Osorio to maybe get to 100, then we'll be asking the question, will anybody else get there beyond this kind of crop of players? It's pretty great to see someone, a homegrown guy like Osorio, add to his tally and get to play as many games in Toronto as he has been able to, and he'll do again on Tuesday. Albeit, like you, I know you're a little sour that we haven't yet had a game in Vancouver for Jesse Marsh. It will come. It'll come.
Well, forget Osorio. That one's less jarring because he's been around the program for a decade. The one was the pregame. You saw it, like the future. Alistair Johnston hitting 50, because that one, he made his debut during COVID in an empty stadium. Yeah. He feels like, well, it was only 4 years ago, but it's or less than 4 years ago. For him to hit 50 in that span is the one where I was more like, whoa, that feels wild.
But in this squad, this rotating squad and a deep squad that we've seen, he is a familiar face that stands out when he hasn't been there, right? He's very much cemented himself as a regular. But wild to think that Tajon Buchanan was on the Olympic qualifying squad when they were at the Gold Cup in 2021. And was it the Gold Cup or was it qualifying that Alistair Johnson had made his appearance? I think it was in World Cup qualifying. It may not have been in the Oct.
It was Bermuda.
It was Bermuda, yeah.
In game one of the qualifiers, he came off the bench. And
April 21 or something before the Gold Cup. That's crazy, man. The world was a very different place then. A very different place. Last thing I'll say before I hand the reins to Ben. Tajon did come on for the last 12 minutes. Man, it's incredible that Tajon Buchanan is back on the pitch at all, let alone playing competitive minutes for his country. I know he hasn't played them for his club. It's great that he's got a run, and great that he's back in camp, but just great to see him running and able to play again, because you break your leg, you're not supposed to be back on the pitch in a matter of months. And for him to be playing competitive action, albeit not Serie A, but to be on that bench for the last 4 games, he's near, ready to make an appearance at that top level, and it's not the end of November. That's unbelievable to me.
Oh yeah, it was huge to see, super, just great to see him back. I think that was first and foremost. Great to see him on the pitch. Recovery like that must be tough, especially just the timing of it all. He missed the fun part, so to speak, of Copa America when you go into the knockout stages. He then missed a big opportunity to win minutes with Inter. It must be tough on a guy. So for him to recover, to be back with the national team, you're excited for him on that regard. Just a side note, because I always have to be a sicko about that sort of stuff. I did find it intriguing that he went in on the left and not the right, because I have wondered that if, when everyone's healthy, there was a lot of talk of Buchanan versus Ahmed, if maybe the solution was Buchanan and Ahmed, and Buchanan getting reps on the left with Ahmed having, been such a regular on the right. That opens up that possibility. So, of course, I don't think we'll see it this window because it's just too early for Buchanan. But I thought that intrigued me as well in terms of the future of, Buchanan maybe slotting back into the starting 11, like Marsh kind of giving him that and that sort of carrot, so to speak.
Good shot, man. Good to talk about the game with you. And I think I've still left you with a lot of ammo because you are a bit of a sicko, as you described, to still get to a bunch of stuff with Ben, my man. So I'm Dunlop and I'm done.
And I guess it's a second half of a show here. Ben Steiner joining alongside Alex, taking over for Brendan. Guess a bit of a late sub, and late subs did something significant, of course, in the CanMNT match tonight with Junior Hoylett making that instant impact coming back into the picture. But we'll take a look at some of the other questions that come up as well. I thought it was a game that very well, could have been an email. It was I nearly fell asleep during it. I had to come up with 3 thoughts on the match, and it was just not an exciting match, and I think everyone listening to the pod can probably agree. But from Risa K on Blue Sky, thoughts on the goalkeeping situation for Canada, risks and benefits with the 1A, 1B approach. Risa, thanks so much for the question, especially those who have joined us on Blue Sky, considering, where Twitter is going. But in terms of the 1A, 1B, I think it's good. If you can have that debate of two goalkeepers that want to maintain strong form, want to be pushing themselves in CanMNT training and with their club teams, then you're going to have guys that want to elevate their performances. Because I think we saw when it was, Milan Borjan and then the rest, it was Borjan got maybe a little bit complacent. He knew that he wasn't going to lose that starting role under John Herdman in that era of the national team. And at a point, he was a strong enough goalkeeper to have that, full-time role as the starter. But if you have two goalkeepers that are pushing each other, especially in a national team where it's not like, you're going to sign another or transfer one out, like these two are the guys. They will continue to accept call-ups. They will continue to be a part of this team. If they can push each other and elevate their performances, then that's only a positive. The thing tonight, though, is I don't necessarily think we saw much from Dane St. Clair because he didn't even make one save. He wasn't credited with one.
No, he didn't need to do much, although I think he had a very solid goalkeeping performance by what you can judge him for. His handling in the air was magnificent. There was a few crosses where I wondered if he might be a bit shaky, if he might punch. He caught them all. Always a good sign of a confident goalkeeper. His angles were good on a few chances Suriname had. Like, you can't judge him for, even if he didn't get a shot on target, I still think he did a lot well. And possession too, he also had some good moments in terms of just playing out the back, calming it down. But what I'll say about 1A, 1B, and I said this a lot with Borjan versus Crepo, and I think we saw it long term, is these sort of 1A versus 1B battles are good on multiple fronts. It means you have two good goalies. It's always a good
start.
You don't just have one really good guy and then it's the rest. Like, Canada's was lucky that they had Borjan and they had Crepo, who was right behind him, and now they have Crepo and Dane St. Clair side by side, and who knows, maybe Sirwalt will be able to push into that mix a bit more. Maybe there's some more over the next few years, like a Bomer, etc. That's great news. But what I think you see is that it helps the number one, because the number one, or even, you can't even say number one in this case, it helps whoever's in the net keep their spot. Okay, there's someone right behind me. That's good. Like you mentioned, the competition with Borjan. But also, that's not so much a factor. Like, Borjan, his performances were good. But what the problem was when they dipped, and then you don't have that guy ready, and then maybe you end up hanging on a bit too long, and there's maybe a lack of confidence in the next guy up. That's where I say the long-term aspect. And I think that's really going to pay off long-term, is that, look, heading into the 2026 World Cup, I feel confident to say that I have zero confidence in who the starting goalkeeper is going to be. And that's a good thing, because, whoever the guy is that's leading Canada down the tunnel at 2026 at BMO Field is the guy that's going to earn it over the next year and a half, and is going to be in the better form at the time, is going to be in the better situation because they've gone through this battle together. And I think you see that in a day like today, where because the battle is so close, so competitive, that a St. Clair steps up and is ready. Whereas maybe had he been kind of forgotten and it's all right, go start. Maybe you're a bit shaky, you're a bit nervous, you weren't expecting. And I think Marsh's platoon, you can see the impact it's having.
I think it's a little bit different when, both goalkeepers are playing at the same level. They're both in MLS. They're both starters in MLS. Crepo, of course, has taken that dip behind into the backup role at times with Portland, and he was down the stretch as they, flubbed in the playoffs against the Whitecaps. But when you look at whether it's St. Clair or Crepo, it's not necessarily, one guy that does well with the national team and then there's another guy that consistently plays at a higher level. I'm thinking of, an Atakubi versus Davies debate type thing, where Atakubi, say he was playing tremendously Schaffelberg type form with the national team, but then wasn't putting in those same performances with the Whitecaps. Well, you're going to start Davies every day of the week. And that's not the case with the goalkeepers. And I think that's a good thing, because when you look at having Crepo or St. Clair, it's an individualized position in a lot of ways. Sure, Crepo is a lot better acting as a bit more of a sweeper keeper, but in a lot of ways it's a shot-stopping position, and that's the core of goalkeeping. And so when you have those two keepers being very similar aspects, you take who's ever in the better form, right? If a goalkeeper's feeling it, as St. Clair is with Minnesota, you put him in net, and if it goes badly, then sure, you have the other option of Crepo, and it can go vice versa. If Crepo is in good form and St. Clair is maybe having a dip of form with Minnesota or wherever he moves on to as well. So I think you just choose the hot hand, especially in such an individualized position. And the same thing could go for a striker. You look at Jonathan David, like he wasn't going to be the one sitting tonight. It was Kyle Aaron, who struggled with Mallorca.
And also Kyle Aaron, as we found out heading into the game, had a bit of a knock, so that's also part of the reason why he misses out. But no, I get the point that you're making, and it's a good one in the sense that when you have that battle, when you have that competition, you go with whoever's hot, whoever the edge is. I guess where a lot of the debate heading into this, because look, let's be real, we kind of spoke about it. If you're purely going on form and everything, it was St. Clair's net every day of the week. But then, of course, it's never so simple on the national team. You go historical performances, like you've seen it with guys like Schaffelberg, where even when he struggled, you put on the national team shirt, you do your thing. Canada's kind of got that with a few of these guys right now.
Crepeau is one of those guys, to be fair. Like, he has had that form when he puts on the national team shirt. He's always good. There hasn't necessarily been a poor game for Crepeau.
Exactly. But then now we see that St. Clair comes in, can be the same for him. And now I think that bodes well, because we do have to remember this was Marsh's first real competitive start he's asked St. Clair to make. Because the third place game, yes, it's an important game, but it felt like a bit of a, all right, like just to say you played at the tournament kind of start. Same with his first start against the Netherlands. It's a friendly. He starts against Mexico. It's a friendly. It's his first real competitive start under Marsh. So for him to go out and pass the test, I think it was huge.
From Christina at 6 Yard Screamers on Blue Sky, or I guess not at 6 Yard Screamers, maybe at 6yard.bluesky.social or however Blue Sky works. I think we're all still getting used to that. But since Marsh took over, which player do you think has had the most influence on the team's overall performance level? And I think it has to be Jacob Schaffelberg with the way that he delivered at Copa America, which is still the bulk of what Marsh has done with the national team.
Yeah, I mean, Schaffelberg's a good shout. I think the one I'm going to go to, and I think it becomes clear. I almost put this asterisk, when I see it, just to remind myself, and I think it's something that we, I guess, as a Canadian conscious should do. Moise Bombito. He's not normal how good he is. And I say that in the sense that, that's not been a usual thing for Canada, where it's there's this guy that just puts out fires, that just cleans things out. In the Suriname game, there's a few moments where it got rocky, and there's Moise Bombito with a flying header or a clearance or a big tackle, or he wins his 1v1 duel. He just doesn't set a foot wrong. In this game, he didn't set a foot wrong and was incredible. So I would say Bombito, because I think for all of the talk of the other positions, he's kind of revolutionized that back line. He has taken that back line, he's made it his own. Now he's shown that it doesn't matter if it's Cornelius or Waterman, he's comfortable leading that back line on his own, and that makes such a big difference, because now Canada can go in the game. And today, the baseline was St. Clair didn't need to face any shots because of his back line in front of him, and I think that's something that's it takes some getting used to, because it's such a new phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, we spend so much time talking about the goalkeepers that you can kind of forget about that adjusted backline. And I asked Marsh about it after the match as well in a very quick post-game press conference. I guess one could say it was about 5 minutes on, I think it was on the Canada Soccer Media Director's phone as well. But got a question in about, that backline shifting. And Bombito as well, playing alongside Waterman, which he hasn't done a ton of, if at all, before this. I'm not sure. That
Just
he looked
Panama,
composed.
He
was still able to lead that center back pairing and really solidify himself. And as you say, it's not something that Canada's used to per se, but he's still so young as well. He's elevated so quickly. He's so talented, and he's able to really lead that back line that around him was completely different than it usually is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the sign, really, again, of his leadership. Because we'll always talk about his skills, and rightfully so. It is nice to have a 6'4" guy who can run like the wind. We'll continue to say it. It was nice. There was one ball over the top in the first half, and then Bombito just came in full speed, shouldered the guy, and you're like, okay, that's nice. But it's also the intangibles. There's a reason why he's come right to Nice, a Europa League team, and dropped in. And his talent certainly helps. But it's his mentality. That's never easy for a young center back to do. And you see it in a game like this, where he can lead those around him. He can be a lead, an experienced voice, even if he doesn't have that actual experience. And that sometimes that's so important, because as a defender, why do we always say defenders peak a little later? Why, defenders can still play into their 30s? It's all about experience. So that Bombito already has that at 24, given that he's barely played 100 professional games, if he even has. I think he's only at 50, 70 or something like that. That's a bit why I'm so excited about his growth, because it's only going to get better.
And from Niles Guo, is there a reason why Sam Adekubi isn't getting minutes, still getting used to the system? What would we expect to see from him in the second leg, or just from Canada in the second leg as well? And I think on the Adekubi point, he hasn't been in many Jesse Marsh camps. He wasn't, of course, with the team at the Copa America, and he hasn't, necessarily developed a spot on that left side, because you look at that left side, you have Schaffelberg, who's been in great form with the national team, and I don't think you're sitting him at any point until his performances dip in the national shirt. They've dipped at Nashville. That hasn't reflected with Canada necessarily. And then when you look at the back line, Richie Larea has had more experience in that position, and so he steps in tonight, and he has more experience with those guys on the back line. And then when you look at, when you have Davies, he's going to be picked over everyone, right? Like that it's not even a conversation. And so when you just look at that left side, it's extremely crowded. You add Hoylett into the picture as well. Like that is just a very crowded left side, and that's where Adekubi plays, right? That's where he's at his best, even if you would drop him into a more attacking role than sort of the wing back, left back role that he would usually play. If you drop him into that role, you're competing just with a lot of players, and it's great to have that depth. Don't get me wrong, like Canada's not had that depth before to sit a guy like Adekubi, who's been crucial in the past, and his level is still there. As much as I've doubted him injury-wise over the last while, his level he can still hit, but Canada just has other options in better form.
Yeah, I mean, before this camp, there just wasn't really the time for him. Yes, it would have been nice to give him a couple minutes off the bench, because he was a late call up into the September window, right? He only got called up for the Mexico game last minute. And then in the October window, the circumstance wasn't there to get on the field. That's fine. Davies was putting in a good shift that day. For this one, it was all circumstance, right? Like, yeah, we have to forget, like, Richie Larea, I thought was very good tonight. I thought he put in
composed.
A good shift. Yeah, he was composed. You mentioned, like, he was good on the ball, won fouls, did Richie Larea things, right? And that, when you're leading 1-0, you're not going to bring in an Adekubi to replace Larea. Larea was going to see out the game. So to answer the question that Niles had, I think we'll see Adekubi. I think Marsh will want to throw Adekubi out there. I think especially Larea played some hard minutes in this game. Even if he starts next game, I don't think he's going 90 again. He's out of season, you have to remember. Maybe Adekubi starts because of that. But I think for this game, it just wasn't the right time for him. And I am confident that we'll see him at BMO Field.
I think when you look at the back line sort of being thrown in the mixer for this window as well, by having Larea as somebody that's played with Bombito and Johnston in the past consistently through the last little while, like that is something that you can really look at and be able to develop from and be able to have that consistency. Whereas if you have Adekubi in there, well, you have Waterman adjusting to the system and you have Adekubi adjusting to the system. And even though Adekubi might be a little bit more native on that left side, when you just throw everything, you're going to get miscommunication, or you could get miscommunication, and that's going to create more issues. When you have talented players bearing down on you, like Geraldo Becker was quiet tonight, but I think that has a lot to do with Richie Larea able to bully him off the ball several times, and Larea just looked
sides,
composed.
And then he gave Johnston and Waterman fits and got yellows off both of them. So.
Exactly right. Like he was handled, but I don't think that he would have been handled the same way if that back line had been thrown in the mixer a little bit more.
Well, I guess we'll find out in the next game. We'll see what they do, because that is interesting that they switched Becker like that, and that he did cause a little more problems. I wonder if maybe we'll see Canada adjust as well to make up for that, because Bombito, I wonder if it was less getting away from Larea, but that Larea-Bombito combo, right? Because we kind of saw Waterman-Johnston, which makes sense. They're old Montreal teammates, so familiarity. Maybe if you're Marsh, maybe almost be like, yo, Bombito, like stay on his side. Like if they're gonna go left, like maybe switch sides with Bombito to for some help defense, so to speak. Basketball term there.
And of course, there's the second leg as well. That happening Tuesday at BMO Field. Very bummed it's on Tuesday because I won't be able to get to the run club that I go to in Toronto. Very fun run club, beer run club on Tuesday nights. But question from
the big event happening, yes, this weekend, right?
Yeah, exactly. But from James at UJ11. That was good old school dirty Concacaf fixture. I was worried for injuries for our guys. How different will the starting 11 be for the next fixture? I'm so glad that Junior made a return and, of course, got the goal as well. And so any tweaks to be made for that game? Of course, we talked about the goalkeeping that could change. I don't think it does change. We talked about Adekubi potentially getting in as well. I am not looking forward to the crowds because the crowds in Toronto have been absolutely absurd over the last few days. I walked by the Taylor Swift concert, and that was insane. It has completely taken over Toronto, and I think anybody listening from Toronto can probably agree to that. Did even, Gareth Wheeler spoke about Taylor Swift on the broadcast, like it's all-encompassing. And I believe she has a show on Tuesday as well. So the crowds of that, there's probably a Raptors or Leafs game, and Canada, plus the run club that I go to is going to be absolutely packed in downtown Toronto. So not looking too forward to that. But in terms of actual football adjustments, I don't think we're going to see too much other than potentially Laren starts if he is healthy enough?
Yeah, that's a good question. I could see up to 3 to 4 changes at the same time, because I think it also depends on the loads of guys and, what they're physically capable of. We talked about it with Brendan off the top. We were surprised to see Ahmed and Schaffelberg go 70. Like, that's heavy minutes in the heat. Usually we've seen Schaffelberg be a 60-minute guy. Actually, they went 75, I think it was, by the time the Hoylett Buchanan subs both happened.
Well, they only got 12 minutes, so it would have been like 78.
Yeah, so it's like I was surprised that both of them did. I wonder if on the wing that opens up the spot for like a Hoylett start, maybe because he scores his goal, you ride that confidence. See, I don't think Buchanan will physically be ready to start. The striker one's a good question. What we also pondered is if Larin isn't good to go, you saw Aloisi get his audition given the state of the game. We kind of hinted about it earlier. Maybe you go for a 3 in midfield and you go Kone, Chouanier, Eustachio, try to really muck up the midfield with some athleticism and from Chouanier, some work rate, put David to lead the line on his own. Maybe that's a way to go as well. And then Adekubi is, I think, the one thing to watch as well, just because Larea played such heavy minutes. Because otherwise, I don't think you change Bombito, Waterman, St. Clair, keep that triangle together. Johnston's not going to go anywhere. Eustachio's not going to go anywhere. David's not going to go anywhere. The rest of the guys, there could be question marks. Even Kone, he only played 60 minutes. He's not fully fit, but I think that was him coming off early was with leg 2 in design.
And Canada, of course, in a very similar position to the United States after their first game. When you take a look at some of these first legs across CONCACAF, what else have you seen as we sort of enter the stage of second legs?
Yeah, I mean, quite interesting that, so far we only have 3, because I don't think the fourth game is quite done yet as of recording, because of course you can't forget Honduras and Mexico. 0-0, 56-minute live as a recording. Maybe it finishes 1-0 Mexico, because that's been the theme, that US won 1-0, that Panama went away to Costa Rica, won 1-0, Canada wins 1-0. But yeah, it shows the level of this region is growing, that all these ties are tough quarterfinal ties on the road, not easy games, but also credit to the higher seed in each of those cases. Like, it really feels like, Panama, Mexico, US, Canada, that's the big 4 right now in CONCACAF. That's who you expect at the Final Four. And I guess it'll be surprising to see anything but those Final Four, and it's going to be a heck of a Final Four.
And Canada certainly no certainties as well heading into the second leg, but a slight advantage.
Got to take care of business first. That's what I say. So I say hypothetically, it would be a heck of a Final Four should it happen.
It certainly would be. But that's all we've got for our post-match episode from Northern Fútbol here. Make sure to like, subscribe, follow us. I think somebody set up a bot for us on Blue Sky that will post all of the podcast episodes as well, so you can follow us there. You can watch us on the 90th minute. We're kind of on whatever social media except for Facebook. And then, of course, you can follow us personally at Brendan Dunlop, at Alex Gringy-Ruzik, and at Ben Steiner00. Same on Blue Sky as well. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll be back next time.